You just can't get a better picture in terms of comedy than The Lady Eve. A better romantic comedy, better screwball comedy. There aren't any better ones. There's some that are as good, perhaps, but nothing is better. Here's a movie that's romantic, and yet it's terribly funny. It also has more twists than you'd think it would. It begins with a snake reminding us of the Garden of Eden. And the picture has a lot of curves in it, like a snake. It throws you. It goes in odd ways. One of the things that you have to bear in mind about Preston Sturges is that when he finally did start directing in 1939, he was over 40. So he was kind of a late bloomer as a director. He'd been writing, of course, for years, for the theater and for movies, but to direct his own screenplay, that only happened 2 years before The Lady Eve. Sturges was, in fact, the first, in the talking era, the first writer who became a director. And his success opened the door for all the many, many who followed, including Billy Wilder and Sammy Fuller and Joe Mankiewicz. So you have to credit Sturges with the breakthrough of the writer-director. The Lady Eve was the third in a run of about 7 really phenomenal movies made in 4 years. And then everybody says, what happened to him? Well, I don't know how he did those 7 pictures in 4 years, all of them of that kind of quality. You could say he burned himself out. But what a way to go. I would say the most noticeable hallmark of the Sturges style is this often very literate dialogue. And on top of it, you've got him doing physical humor, slapstick. You know, Henry Fonda arrives at the ocean liner and she just drops an apple on his head, you know, just for the fun of it. And first time she meets him, she trips him, so he falls. She keeps tripping him. He keeps falling throughout the picture. Later on in the movie, at the party back at his father's house, he falls 3 or 4 times in a row. Falls over the sofa. You know, that sofa's been there for 20 years. Nobody ever tripped over it before, says Eugene Pallette. Eugene Pallette gives a great performance as the father, Henry Fonda's father. Henry Fonda plays an heir to an ale fortune who has been on a desert island for some time studying snakes. It's the only time Henry Fonda appeared in a Preston Sturges movie. It's actually one of the only times that Fonda did a comedy that required not only excellence in dialogue, but also an ability to do pratfalls. It's hard to imagine anybody else in the part. I suppose Joel McCrea could have played it. But what Fonda has this very attractive, he's very good looking, and has a kind of innocence, which of course is a wonderful thing for Stanwyck to fool around with, since she plays, you know, a dame who is a professional con artist. Here's a story about a girl who cheats a guy and who really pretty much takes him for a ride, even though she doesn't intend to take him for a ride. It's a peculiar movie in the sense that she's the one who's wrong, but he turns out to be wrong in his inability to bend, in his stiffness, in his academic what's good is good, what's wrong is wrong kind of attitude. Stanwyck is a very good speech that ends with something like, so the good girls aren't always that good and the bad girls aren't always that bad. That is a Sturges trademark, seeing the good in the bad and the bad in the good, so to speak. You have it in The Great McGinty, which was his first film. A guy who's basically a bum who's paid to vote 38 times in a local election, and eventually he becomes governor of the state, and he loses everything by being honest. I think Sturges has as the motto of that movie that, you know, there's nothing as dangerous for a crook as a moment of honesty, just like there's nothing as dangerous for an honest man as a moment of crookedness. Charles Coburn as Stanwyck's father is a marvelous example of a kind of a classy crook, you know, who has his own code of ethics. Let us be crooked but not common. The card shark who loves his daughter and really doesn't approve of her getting involved with this square. Stick to your own, you know, kind of thing. And it's interesting how the whole movie's skewed that way, how your affection really is with the crooks in the story, who have to teach the rich people lessons of life. I think The Lady Eve falls very strongly into the genre of screwball comedy. Screwball is a phrase based on a performance of Carole Lombard's, and I think it was My Man Godfrey, in which somebody said that was a real screwball, you know, heiress she played, and the phrase screwball became synonymous with that kind of romantic comedy with farce overtones. For some reason, the public has never responded to the word farce in movies. You say it's a farce, nobody goes. Screwball comedy, they'll go. So I would say that's what it is, a romantic screwball comedy. You know, Sturges was a writer first and a director second, so the kind of literary aspect of it tends to dominate, although the films are very filmic, because Sturges had a real flair for the rhythm of the piece. You know, his wife, Sandy Sturges, she said that he didn't sit down and write the screenplay. More often, he dictated the screenplay to a secretary who had to write pretty quickly and take it down in shorthand. And he would act out all the parts quite well, supposedly, and write the dialogue as he was acting out the parts. Well, that's pretty impressive. When you look at The Lady Eve, the extraordinary richness, the vibrance of the dialogue, and the way it fits the characters so perfectly, I guess has a lot to do with the fact that Preston Sturges was a hell of a good actor. While you can talk about a lot of filmmakers' visual approach to things, I don't know that Sturges has a particularly noticeable visual style. However, his camera is always in the right place. He never cuts the wrong time. And he does one of the things that's sort of disappeared from movies today, which is the master shot, where you have two actors in a single shot and you play the entire scene. The most obvious example would be Stanwyck and Fonda. She's lying on a chaise lounge and he kind of lying next to her, and then he ends up on the floor and she's playing with his hair and he's overcome with excitement for her but can't do anything about it. That whole scene plays without a cut for quite a while. And there's a certain tension that develops when you have a long take, in the sense you're watching two actors playing these extraordinary scenes with no interference, no comment from the director as to who you're supposed to watch or anything like that. And that's movies too. That's a form of cinema. The camera just watching something. You know, it's like when somebody said to Chaplin, "Your camera angles aren't very interesting," and he said, "No, they don't have to be. I am interesting." And that is something, you know, if you're photographing something interesting, you don't have to dance around with the camera. I think there's no question but The Lady Eve is right up there among the great American films. It's interesting that the New York Times picked it as #1 the year 1941, the same year as Citizen Kane, the same year as How Green Was My Valley. And 1941, in fact, is one of the great years in American films. You've got not only The Lady Eve by Preston Sturges, but you've got Sullivan's Travels by Preston Sturges. He had 2 films out in that one year, both extraordinary. Unfortunately, comedy is never taken as seriously as drama. But as an American talking comedy, I don't think you can get much better than The Lady Eve. It's an amazingly modern and witty film that doesn't date at all.